Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be all about books that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. I went into them with fairly low expectations and they ended up surprising me. I feel like often we hear the opposite, books not worth the hype, and I thought it would be fun to do the opposite completely because last month I read Paranessi, which I went into it kind of nervous because I had meant to read that book the year prior and didn't pick it up, and I was very nervous because everyone kept saying how it's weird and it's very hit and miss, and it's kind of like magical realism, which quite frankly has not been my best genre. But after putting it down the first day after reading only 2-3 pages, like seriously, I decided to push through and I really enjoyed it. So completely took me by surprise. Really not my usual thing, but it worked out just fine. I ended up really loving it. Plus, it's the kind of book that I feel like looking back, you love it more and more as time goes by instead of the opposite. So if you were looking at it, definitely read more than the first 3 pages, like not like I did, and you might enjoy this. Plus, there's a little bit of like academia vibes from it, so definitely worth it if you are someone that enjoys beautifully written kind of books, less action driven. This was good. The second book, I thought it wasn't going to be worth the hype. I'm just admitting it. I went into it very nervous. Plus, the series is so big. I didn't think it was going to happen. At the Wheel of Time, I've only read the first book, which is The End of the World, and I ended up really enjoying it more than expected, especially characters. I think Matt, damn you, Matt. I remember reading it and being so annoyed at him because like, can you make things worse? Probably, actually. But I ended up really liking it. I feel like I haven't been lucky with like older fantasy books. I feel like there's always so much sexism and just like, it just, you know, they read dated. And it wasn't the case with this one, at least for the first book. I am starting to book 2. Well, technically I started book 2, put it down because I just, pile of shame, okay? Pile of shame. But I really like this one. I think what happened is that I watched a TV show and absolutely hated it. So that's why I have yet to continue. But book 1 really took me by surprise. I really enjoyed the story. Like I said, the characters and the world seems super interesting. But again, I'm still intimidated by the whole 14 books. It's a lot, but we'll continue. But this was much better than I expected. The Priory of the Orange Tree. I was really intimidated by the size of that thing. It is a thick book. It reads basically like a whole trilogy in one book, but I wish there were more standalone books in fantasy because they're always like huge series and sometimes they feel stretched, right? But this was definitely very satisfying because the whole story is one. The world was super interesting and I feel like I was left wanting more because it was a single book. But the author has mentioned that she's planning on putting more books in the same world, so I'm glad we're going to get more stories from it because it was really interesting. My only complaint is that the final battle was kind of quick, but otherwise this was so much better than expected because I had seen her other series, the Bone Season series. I have the first book on my shelf. I have yet to read it, but I kept seeing it as like a YA book and I was like, oh, I think I'm over YA books. I feel like I've been burned so many times on Booktube, but they're actually adult books. So I ended up really enjoying it. We'll read more by the author and I totally recommend that one. Definitely worth the hype. The Sword of Kaijan. Shame on me. I had it on my Kindle for like a year or 2 years, I think, before I picked it up because I forget them. I think I will have to do like a challenge where I read all of the ones, some at least of the ones that I have because I keep forgetting about them and it's not good. I also love using my Kindle. I just forget about that every time. Anyway, also standalone fantasy. This one, it took me like about halfway point to really get into it. I was really nervous because it was really popular, getting more and more hype. It's self-published, so it wasn't super well known, but the people that did read it loved it. And at the midpoint, I was like, I don't know. I'm getting really annoyed with the main female character, but nope. Ended up absolutely blowing my mind. Absolutely loved the second half, and the build-up was completely worth it and made complete sense with the characters too. So completely unexpected for me because again, I forgot I even owned it, and it was great. Really great. One of the best books that I've read in fantasy in a while. One that used to get mentioned once in a while in Booktube, but I haven't seen it in a while. Totally worth it. Is The Library at Montcharl. Okay. This is going to be one of the weirdest books you're going to read. You might need to like push through till the midpoint also with this one because the story feels very disjointed in the beginning. Like you're following this girl who like her father, not really her father, is a god teaching the kids a bunch of different things, and it's very dark and like gruesome. There's also like investigation. I believe there's even a point of view at one point that's like through the eyes of a lion. It is weird, like straight up weird, but I read the second half in a day because I needed to know how it ended and I was not prepared. Even though people told me about it, I still was not prepared, and I think this is a surprising read for a lot of people, and it was worth it. It's just a tough sell because, like I said, it sounds really strange, but I loved it. Everyone and their mother has been raving about Dark Academia, and I have been wanting to love them because murder mystery, unlikable, snubby characters, academia setting, university setting, yes, that all sounds super appealing to me, but I'll either feel like, yeah, it was okay, like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, to like straight up not liking them. The vast majority of the other books that I've read with that setting. So when I read If We Were Villains, I had very low expectations because I was prepared to not like it also. But no, turns out it was good. Still the same thing, murder mystery, Dark Academia. You're following, I think it's 7 different actors that are learning like Shakespeare's play. I do recommend the audiobook because obviously listening to the Shakespeare plays like that was great. I know nothing about Shakespeare. I've never read any of the plays, never seen any, and I still really enjoyed it. So I'm assuming that if you are more well-versed, you will like it even more. But yes, this was great. This was great. Definitely worth the hype. I am not a romance reader. I'm just not. I wish I were because sometimes they sound fun, but then when I read them, I always just not root for any of them because the couples just don't make sense in my head. But Book Lovers by Emily Henry was actually good. Obviously, my expectations were kind of low. I just wanted to have fun, and I did. I had seen her books absolutely everywhere, so I didn't want to build up the hype too much in my head, but 2 characters that I enjoy reading, definitely a good setting for me. And it is a like enemy to lover, but it didn't go too far into the enemy section. I feel like they always go too far, and I'm like, I hate you. I don't want you to end up together at all. But I did, so definitely enjoy that one. Definitely worth the hype. Made me want to read more by the author, so I'll definitely look up her other books this summer. The next one is the second book in a series because Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. I enjoyed Vicious, but it was like a solid 4 stars for me. Like 2 friends that discover a way to get superpowers and become supervillains instead of superheroes. That sounded great, but I just wasn't super invested in their story in the first book. But the second book completely changed my mind. I was completely invested, and you're also introduced to Marcella, my favorite supervillain, from the first page, and she did nothing wrong. So second book was so much better than the first one, which doesn't happen super often. I'm definitely looking forward to book 3. So this was worth pushing through after book 1. Not that book 1 was horrible, but I feel like this was definitely worth more hype than book 1, even though everyone disagrees with me. But it definitely took me by surprise because I didn't expect to enjoy that one more. We've been reading classics on Patreon every 2 months, and I feel like classics, I used to read so many, and it's been hit and miss. It really depends on which one. But we read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and I adored it. I really liked it. The main character is super likable. She's way too nice for the world. But the book felt so feminist, like so current. Still, I really wasn't expecting it. Obviously, the ending is like, makes sense for the time. I did want better for her, but it doesn't matter. I totally think that this is a classic that is worth reading nowadays. I think it's funny how when she passed away, the author, her sister didn't republish this book because it was too controversial. And now I'm like, yes, I loved it. 200 years later, but still totally worth it. Definitely surprised me. I went into it with like, not too high expectations, and so good. I really enjoyed the movie The Arrival. I'm a big fan of First Contact with Aliens, and when I learned that this was actually from a short story, I decided to read it. But my expectations were not too high because once again, I've been burnt, I've been disappointed. But Stories of Your Life and Others is a short story collection, and they're all so strange, but in a good way. And I actually prefer the short story to the movie. Well, no, that's not true. They have both their good sides. I feel like the movie, like the language for the aliens is so visual that it was really beautiful. But I feel like Hollywood has a tendency to add either like romances or like trying to make stories more tragic just for the sake of it. And like it makes sense for the movie, but I feel like the book did it better. And again, you get a bunch of other stories too. I definitely recommend the author in general. He has another one, which Exhalation, I think. This one is more like technology. Think like Black Mirror. So definitely recommend that one too. But my expectations were high because I already expected to like it because of this one, so it doesn't count for the video. But this one I think is worth a shot if you haven't checked it out yet. And then last but not least, a book that also took me by surprise because I didn't think I was going to love it as much as I did is The Queen of Tearling, which earlier this year I was trying to read from my shelf books that had pretty covers and spine. And look at this one, so pretty. I had completely forgotten I owned this. It's another book I had bought when I first started Booktube, and I believe this one at the time was YA because YA fantasy were everywhere. This one is adult and it was great. Like I really, really enjoyed it. It gave me the feels of like beginning of booktube, like the kind of fantasy books that were popular. I'm sounding like it's so long ago, but like, you know, like 5-6 years ago, these books were super popular, specific fantasy books, and definitely strong vibes of that. But I really, really liked it. I'm nervous about book 2 and 3 because of everyone comments. You're making me so nervous, but I will continue the series because I really, really love this, to my surprise. I was expecting to like unhaul this, and no, never. So these are all books that I ended up loving a lot more than I expected. They took me by surprise. I think they're worth the hype, and you might want to check them out if you are interested. Let me know in the comment section what books you didn't expect to love as much as you did, because I'm curious. Thumbs up, subscribe. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you in an upcoming video very soon. Bye. Kiss on a cheek or loving just like